Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Mountain Lake Files. I want to take a bit and thank every single one of you who have supported what we do here at Mountain Lake. It means a lot to us, and without you guys, well, we wouldn't have a channel. So thank you very, very much. Tonight's first encounter was taking place in the summer of 1960 in the woods of Dearborn, Michigan. The story goes, myself, a boy of maybe 10 years old, and my two childhood friends went to a swim in a pond and go camping. We decided to bring a makeshift bow and arrow, a hatchet, and some clothes, a tent, and some food on our bikes. The area was wooded and marshy. We had a small fire going that evening when we started hearing splashing coming towards us. We noticed a large, dark figure coming out of the water towards us. Even though it was in the water, it was easily around 8 feet tall. I yelled, "Stop!" and pointed my arrow at it. It kept coming, so I shot it at him. It started charging at us. We all scattered, running wildly through the woods. I could feel the footsteps of the beast rumbling the ground behind me. That's when I scaled a tree to the very top to get away from it and listened to it huff, puff, and grunt beneath me. Not sleeping at the sound of every breaking twig, I stayed there all night, petrified and worried for my friends. As soon as day broke, I crept down slowly, terrified it might still be stalking me, and crept all the way to my bicycle before fleeing home. My friends had taken a different trail and were already safe. But I can tell you, after this encounter with Bigfoot, I have never been the same and will not enter the woods without a firearm. My father got a science degree majoring in environmental policy and management from the Everglades University. He was passionate about doing everything he could to help in the restoration of the Everglades. The older I got, the more I fell in love with the history and the wildlife of this place. A few times a year, I used to go camping in Ochapee, Florida. My last camping trip changed me. It was so uncomfortably hot and humid that night that I couldn't sleep. I don't know if it was the mosquitoes out in swarms, the clouds of flies that were on a mission to land all over my face, or that the air felt thick enough to cut it with a knife. But sleeping felt impossible. I set up a canopy over my tent made of bug netting material, and while it helped some, it was still unbearably hot. I finally got comfortable enough to fall asleep when I realized I had to use the bathroom. Now, very annoyed, I left my sanctuary to find a place to squat. I wandered away from my sight just enough that I couldn't see my camp anymore. I tried to be fast because this area smelled bad. Just as I started to unbutton my pants, a hand was gently placed on my shoulder. Being that I had gone on this trip alone, I fully panicked. I started running as fast as I could with no direction or keeping track of where I was even going. Just tearing through the woods. I could hear very distantly the sounds of something crashing through the woods behind me. I didn't dare look back. Suddenly, something hit me from my left. Some kind of rock or shell. It hurt. but not enough for me to stop. Whoever or whatever was chasing me. How many are there? How did I get hit on my side? That was just the boost I needed to go faster than I knew I could. I veered to the right. I thought away from danger. Suddenly, just ahead, just behind a tree, a massive figure stepped out. It smelled like my grandparents' barn in Tennessee, but worse, stronger. Maybe like it was mixed with hot garbage. I couldn't barely breathe. It was at least 2 or 3 feet taller than me and the width of 3 men. I fell backwards on the ground into thick, marshy mud. I flipped over and crawled until my feet gained traction, and with all my might started running through the muck. The adrenaline coursing through me was making me shake, but was keeping me moving at a pace I never would have thought possible. I could still hear them, at least 3 of them behind me. I didn't know how to tell where they were coming from or how well they could see me, if at all. So I took a risk and dove into a thicket of cattails. I could hear them whooping and yelling at each other, and what sounded like ripping trees in half, a branch landed right beside me. My bladder finally emptied right there. They still seemed too close. They weren't vocalizing anymore, but I could still hear them walking around. And then I very slowly, very quietly started to crawl elbow deep in the mud. Once I got behind another very tall thicket, I stood up. Far in the distance, I saw greenish-blue orbs of light, maybe the size of a grapefruit. And they were hazy-like, seeing them through thick fog. I had no idea where I was, and I thought that it had to be people, and maybe they could help. I started running that way as fast as my legs could carry me. The steps behind me got faster. It sounded like boulders being thrown into the mud. I could only imagine the sheer weight of those creatures. Why were they after me? When I got to the lights, they started spinning around me faster and faster. The creatures' footsteps started to get further away, but they were howling loudly. I started to get dizzy, and my legs collapsed. I was laying on the ground on my back, barely able to catch my breath. My vision started to tunnel more and more until I fell unconscious. When I finally blinked awake, the sun was blazing down on me. I was covered in dry mud and blood. It took me hours to find my camp. I had run wildly 2 miles from my campsite. I grabbed my belongings and checked back to my car. I haven't gone camping since, and I still don't know what those lights were, as there was no sign of being in the midst of any people around in that area. I don't know what those were, but I can tell you I do believe that they might have been Bigfoot.